The 1619 Project, everybody has heard about the 1619 Project. And as I said before, Donald Trump led an attack on the 1619 Project. And then he created, when he was president, he created the 1776 Commission, the 1776 Commission that put out a non-historical, ahistorical view of history. Luckily, President Joe Biden disbanded the 1776 Commission when he became president, and he took down that report that they had at whitehouse.gov. All right. But what a lot of people don't know, and I've done some presentations in the past before about this, much of what we've been told about Virginia's first Africans, August 20th, 1619, is wrong. Okay. And contrary to popular belief, African people were here in the land we call the United States of America, going back at least 51,700 years ago. Now, this is not saying Native Americans didn't exist, anything like that. No, that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying there were African people here before the people who we call, there were African people here before the people who we have been taught to call Native Americans. All right. We'll get to that in just a minute. So this is a historical marker at Fort Monroe in Virginia, and it notes the arrival of the first Africans in Virginia. This is from the Virginia Department of Historic Resources. There's a good article from VirginiaMercury.com from August 11th, 2019, called Much of What We've Been Told About Virginia's 1619 First Africans is Wrong. Much of what we've been told about Virginia's 1619 First Africans is wrong. And, you know, when we had that 400 year anniversary in or commemoration in 2019, I did a series of interviews with Dr. Leonard Jeffries, Professor James Small, Dr. Wade Nobles, and Dr. David Imhotep. Okay, so those are on our YouTube channel, Michael Imhotep. I'm going to dig into our archives and edit those and rebroadcast those also, because I have hundreds of shows that I've done over the past 14 years that I've been doing the African History Network show. Some interviews I've forgotten about. Some topics I discussed that I've forgotten about, and I go through and see the videos on YouTube or on Blog Talk Radio, etc. In my archives. I was like, wow, I totally forgot about that. But most of them I do remember. So there's a good article from the Washington Post that deals with 1526. And this is something I talk about in my lectures. How people will talk about 1619, but they won't discuss 1526 because the Spanish were taking Africans into the territory we call South Carolina and Georgia, the South Carolina, Georgia area, 93 years before 1619, 93 years before 1619. There's a good article from the Washington Post called Before 1619, There was 1526. The mystery of the first enslaved Africans and what became the United States. And in this article, it talks about how Spanish explorers brought 100 slaves to a doomed settlement in South Carolina or Georgia. Within weeks, the subjugated revolted, then vanished. Okay. I want to pull up the article from the Mercury News. I want to pull that one up because I hear a lot of people saying that Africans first came to this land in August 20th, 1619. Okay. And even though that did happen, usually they don't talk about the fact that this was our land stolen from us and we were here going back at least 51,700 years ago. I'm going to come to that in just a minute. But let's look at this article here from VirginiaMercury.com. Much of what we've been told about Virginia's 1619 first Africans is wrong. Much of what we've been told about Virginia's 1619 first Africans is wrong. So this is a good article by Rex Springston, August 11th, 2019. And I'm just going to share an excerpt of it. Okay. In this piece here, it talks about what really happened. Okay. in 1619. In late July or early August that year, historians say 2 English privateers, pirate ships, little more than pirate vessels, but operating with government sanction, attacked an overcrowded Portuguese slave ship en route to Veracruz in the Gulf of Mexico and stole about 60 enslaved Africans. So the Portuguese slave ship was called the San Juan Batista, and they captured about 350 Africans from Angola, okay, and put them on the San Juan Batista. And there were 2 English pirate ships, the White Lion and the Treasurer. They're going to hijack the San Juan Batista and take about 60 African captives. Okay, about a third of them had died on the brutal voyage. About a third of the 350 captives had died on the brutal voyage. In late August, one of the English ships, the White Lion, Lion, the White Lion, showed up at Point Comfort at the mouth of the James River in present-day Hampton, Virginia, and sold perhaps 30 Africans for desperately needed supplies. So it would say 20 and some odd. So around 20, maybe 30, but 20 and some odd Africans. Was that the beginning of slavery in the New World? No. Historians say the Spanish had enslaved Africans in present-day Latin America for more than a century. The beginning of slavery in what became the U.S. Was this the beginning of slavery in what became the U.S.? No. The Spanish took enslaved Africans to a settlement in the present-day Carolinas in 1526. Okay, the Georgia, South Carolina area in 1526, as I just stated. That's 93 years before 1619. These African slaves rebelled and the settlement failed. Also, the Spanish took African slaves to St. Augustine, Florida, which, unlike the Jamestown colony in Virginia, still thrives. That was in 1565. Okay. And we know that you had Africans being taken into Bermuda in 1616, which was an English colony. It turns out that enslaved Africans were taken to English-controlled Bermuda, part of North America, in 1616. So that's 3 years before, even though that's not part of the contiguous United States, but that was an English colony. That's 3 years before 1619. Okay, so read the rest of this article as well, and we deal with this in the class. Much of what we've been told about Virginia's 1619 first Africans is wrong. The other thing that a lot of people don't understand is that codified slave laws did not exist in any of the 13 colonies, or what would become the 13 colonies, in 1619. Okay, codified slave laws didn't exist then. If you look at one of the books we use in the class is Before the Mayflower by Lerone Bennett Jr. And I think I have it in this presentation here, the page 40 from the 6th edition of Before the Mayflower. And if I don't have it, I'll pull it up. Let me see here. Where is that? Okay, it's later in the presentation right here. This is from page 40 of Before the Mayflower by Lerone Bennett Jr. Okay, and then you have to understand Bacon's Rebellion also to understand this, and we deal with Bacon's Rebellion in the class as well. And actually, let me show you this here. Okay, I have it. I forgot that I have I scanned this and have the PDF. So this is what I show you in class. I'll show you. I'm gonna zoom in. I'll go through this again. I'm gonna zoom in on this. Okay, so you should be able to see this better. Sorry about that. Okay, so this is from page 40 of Before the Mayflower by Lerone Bennett Jr., 6th edition. Okay. And what he's explaining in chapter 2 is how slavery evolves in the colonies. And the way that we think all of this evolved and happened is different than the way it actually happened. He talks about working together in the same field, sharing the same huts, in the same situation, and the same grievances. The first Black and white Americans, aristocrats, accepted. The first Black and white Americans, aristocrats, accepted, developed strong bonds of sympathy and mutuality. They ran away together, played together, and revolted together. They revolted together. That's Bacon's rebellion, for instance, in 1676 in the colony of Virginia. They mated and married, siring a sizable mixed population. In the process, the Black and white servants, the majority of the colonial population, created a racial wonderland that seemed somehow un-American in its lack of obsession about race and color. There was, to be sure, prejudice then, but it was largely English class prejudice, which was distributed without regard to race, creed, or color. There were also, without regard to race, creed, or color. There were also, needless to say, prejudiced individuals in the colony, but this is a fundamental difference between prejudice and racism. Their personal quirks and obsessions were not focused and directed by the organized will of a community. So racism is a system of advantage and privilege distributed based upon race, coming out of the ideology of European white supremacy. Racism occurs when one race of people control the majority of the wealth, power, resources, benefits, privileges, land, access to education, access to opportunity, jobs, etc. And they use that to marginalize, subordinate, and do harm to another race of people by encoding that into the laws, into the legal systems, etc. This is racism. Racism is a system of advantage and privilege distributed based upon race. That's different than prejudice. That's different than somebody having a predisposition to people based upon race, creed, or color, or not liking people, or bigotry, not liking people because of their race or ethnicity or something like that. Racism is a power structure. Racism is encoded into the laws and policies. Okay, so let's go back to this page 40 of Before the Mayflower. Their personal quirks and obsessions were not focused and directed by the organized will of a community. The basic division at that juncture was between servants and free people. The basic division at that juncture was between servants and free people, and there were whites and blacks on both sides of the line of servants and free people. Of all the improbable aspects of this situation, the oddest to many blacks and whites is that white people did not seem to know that they were white. It appears from surviving evidence that the first white colonists had no conception of themselves as white people. The legal documents identified whites as Englishmen and or Christians. Englishmen and or Christians. The word white, with this burden of arrogance and biological pride, developed late in the century, late in the 17th century, late in the 1600s, as a direct result of slavery. and the organized debasement of blacks. So this is going to be after Bacon's rebellion of 1676. The same point can be made from the other side of the line. For a long time in colonial America, there was no legal name to focus white anxiety. The first blacks were called blackamoors, Moors, Negers, and Negars, Negers, Negers, and Negars, Negars, okay? Blackamoors and Moors, Moors. The word negro, a Spanish and Portuguese term for black, did not come into general use in Virginia until the latter part of the 17th century, the 1600s. Okay. All right. So read this. This is from page 40, Before the Mayflower, 6th edition by Lerone Bennett Jr. Okay. So what he's talking about, then you have the Virginia Slave Codes of 1705, right? Virginia Slave Codes of 1705. In section 4 of the Virginia Slave Codes makes a distinction between Moors and Negroes. The Virginia Slave Codes of 1705. When we look quickly here at Bacon's Rebellion, there's a good article from the History Channel on this. And it deals with, and I've talked about this in my classes as well, it deals with them burning down the town of Jamestown, Virginia. So if you look at this article here, why America's first colonial rebels burned Jamestown to the ground. How many people know this history? Why America's first colonial rebels burned Jamestown, Virginia to the ground. Bacon's rebellion was triggered when a grab for Native American lands was denied. This is from October 10th, 2023. It was updated, originally August 2nd, 2019, by Aaron Blakemore for history.com. Excellent article. Okay. And here's a depiction of them burning Jamestown, Virginia to the ground right here. Okay, so very briefly here. A lot of people in this group have shot. Okay, so very briefly here. I'm going to skip over some of this. It talks about Nathaniel Bacon. So long story short, what was happening is you had the tobacco plantations in the colony of Virginia, and the white indentured servants and the African and the enslaved Africans, they were both being exploited by the same people. Okay, and the poor whites, all of this, they were both being exploited by the wealthy plantation owners. At the time, wealthy settlers had built profitable tobacco plantations and used their crops to pay high colonial taxes. But for poorer Virginians, times were lean. Only people who owned land could vote, and the indentured servants and poor Virginians who did not felt disenfranchised. Poor farmers had been hit hard by falling tobacco prices, and many on the borders of the colony's frontier wanted to expand westward. There they faced threats from Native Americans intent on protecting their ancestral lands. When the colonists called on their governor for military support, he refused. Okay, let me fast forward to this. Okay. Okay, so they talk about Nathaniel Bacon, and let's go here. Bacon declared a rebel by Virginia governor. In response, Governor Berkeley declared Nathaniel Bacon a rebel and scheduled elections for a new assembly to solve the problem for good. but Bacon was immediately elected to that legislative body. And when he headed to Jamestown, Virginia to begin his tenure there, he was met with a chilly welcome. Okay, so Bacon gathered his troops. A few weeks later, he marched toward Jamestown, Virginia with 500 supporters, the rebels, and another demand to lead the colony into war against Native Americans. As Nathaniel Bacon's men stood off with Governor Berkeley's men, the governor opened his shirt and showed Bacon his bare chest. Quote, "Here, shoot me," yelled Governor Berkeley, daring Nathaniel Bacon to shoot. Instead, let me see, what the hell, where did that go? Okay, instead, Nathaniel Bacon retreated, traveling throughout Virginia, recruiting other disgruntled rebels. Let's see here. Okay. In response, Nathaniel Bacon and his men rushed into Jamestown, Virginia, burning and pillaging as they went. On the night of September 19th, they torched the entire town, burning it to the ground. This is the entire town of Jamestown, Virginia. On the night of September 19th, they torched the entire town, burning it to the ground. As the embattled governor fled, Nathaniel Bacon's supporters terrorized what remained of the town and the governor's supporters. Okay. Now, I don't know if this was the inspiration for the song, the roof is on fire. We don't need no water. You know, you remember that song? I don't know if Bacon's rebellion and them burning down the town of Jamestown, Virginia was the inspiration for that. Maybe it was. I don't know. Okay. But what's going to happen is this is going to cause a drastic shift in the history that we still feel today. How Bacon's rebellion planted the seeds of race-based slavery. In the aftermath of the rebellion, white planters reacted with alarm to the anger they had seen among the Black Virginians who had joined Bacon's rebellion, because they realized the white indentured servants, poor whites, enslaved African Americans, free African Americans, they all realized that they were being oppressed by the same people, the wealthy elite there in Virginia, the tobacco plantation owners. They realized they had a common enemy, and they all united against their common enemy. Quote, the planters had not been able to control this rowdy labor force of servants and slaves, end quote, historian Ira Berlin told PBS.org, Public Broadcasting System. But soon after Bacon's rebellion, they increasingly distinguished between people of African descent and people of European descent. They enact laws which say that people of African descent are hereditary slaves. So it's going to be after Bacon's rebellion that they're going to institute what we call chattel slavery, in that you are enslaved for perpetuity. Prior to that, as I stated earlier, codified slave laws didn't come into existence until 1641 in colony of Massachusetts. Okay, and then other colonies are going to adopt it. You know, and prior to that, you were an indentured servant for 3 to 5 years, something of that nature, right? So this whole thing is going to evolve. Bacon's rebellion is going to expedite this, and it's going to cause a shift. And then you're going to have the Virginia Slave Codes of 1705. Okay, now planters feared that their white indentured servants could do. They feared what their white indentured servants could do, so they slowly eliminated the system of indentured servitude, relying instead on enslaved Black people, enslaved Africans, to work their plantations. Also, in about 1680 in England, the economy in England improves. So there is a declining amount of people willing to come to the colonies to enter into indentured servitude as well. So you start having a labor shortage. Okay. So now they're shifting more towards African people for slave labor, and they're developing more laws surrounding slavery. Planters feared what their white indentured servants could do, so they slowly eliminated the system of indentured servitude, relying instead on enslaved African people to work their plantations. Backlash from Bacon's rebellion is credited with helping kick off the racial distinctions that defined the colonies and the United States that followed. And we're still dealing with the consequences of the backlash to Bacon's rebellion to this day. Okay, read the rest of this article here. Okay, why America's first colonial rebels burned Jamestown to the ground. Okay, this was Bacon's rebellion. The article could be subtitled "The roof is on fire," you know, but I guess they didn't want to. I guess they didn't like that title. I told them that's what you should call it, but I guess they didn't like that. So it is what it is. Okay. All right. How's everybody doing? Give us a thumbs up, give us a heart, give us a like on this broadcast. You can register for this 12-week online history course that I teach at our web. You can register at our website, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. Support the African History Network, $ the AHN Show, through Cash App, through PayPal, paypal.me/the AHN Show. Here's our QR code for Cash App. Right here, the bottom of the screen. The information is also on our website, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. You can register for the online classes that I teach. We do the classes live. All the sessions are archived and recorded. So you can go back and watch it anytime. You don't have to join us live in the class. And then you can download you can order my DVD lectures and digital downloads of my presentations as well. So that all will help you and help us as well. Yeah, we know African American History Month is coming up also. Follow us. Now I just shut down I just deactivated my TikTok account because I ain't doing TikTok. I don't know if I'll go back to it. I'm not sure. But I have downloaded Fanbase, so I'm setting up Fanbase also. Everybody download Fanbase, set that up. That's an African American owned and operated social media platform owned by Isaac Hayes III. Okay, so you can support us here. Register for the online classes I teach Saturdays, 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Register right here for it. You can do a debit card, credit card, or PayPal. Download our class lesson plan here. We have our Cash App right here, $ the AHN Show. So if you type it into Cash App, type in the full tag, $ the AHN Show, SHOW, because there's some fake ones out there and they'll come up before you type in all of it. Okay. Ours, it will say Michael and it may show my picture there. Okay. So we have a QR code here and this shows it also right here, this graphic here. And then paypal.me/the AHN Show through PayPal. And I know through PayPal, you can set it up for a recurring contribution if you want to. We definitely appreciate that as well. I can't remember if you can do that, set up for a recurring contribution through Cash App. Okay. Let me go back to the PowerPoint presentation. So I want to go to this clip here of Dr. David Imhotep, and I showed this in class. This is from, I think this is about 2011. Dr. David Imhotep was on the he was interviewed by WKRP in Cincinnati. Okay. So we deal with, a lot of you have seen the interviews I've done over the past few years with Dr. David Imhotep, who wrote the book, The First Americans Were Africans, Documented Evidence, and his follow-up book, The First Americans Were Africans, Revised and Expanded. We know he became an ancestor in late 2023. But his book deals with 713 footnotes. It's backed up by 7 peer-reviewed articles. And on page 14 of his book, he talks about how evidence of an African presence 51,700 years ago in a campsite in Allendale County, South Carolina, was discovered by Dr. Albert Goodyear, who's an archaeologist at the University of South Carolina. They found 13 different types of evidence that thoroughly document an African presence in the land we call the United States of America, going back at least 51,700 years ago. So they found artifacts, architecture, campsites, carvings, Egyptian writings, footprints in lava, genetic M174D haploid groups dealing with DNA and genetics, linguistics, paintings, skulls, skeletons, structures, and tools. They found 13 different types of evidence thoroughly documented in African presence. This right here is a picture of Dr. Albert Goodyear. This is an article that came out 20 years ago, November 18th, 2004, from ScienceDaily.com, ScienceDaily.com. The name of this article is New Evidence Puts Man in North America 50,000 Years Ago, okay? And an excerpt of the article from ScienceDaily.com, and this is a scientific website. They have all types of archaeological discoveries, scientific discoveries, things of this nature. An excerpt from the article says, radiocarbon tests of carbonized plant remains where artifacts were unearthed last May along the Savannah River in Allendale County by University of South Carolina archaeologist Dr. Albert Goodyear indicate that the sediments containing these artifacts are at least 50,000 years old, okay? Indicate that the sediments containing these artifacts are at least 50,000 years old, meaning that humans inhabited North America long before the last ice age. So these humans were the short-statured Africans known as the Khoisan. Okay, the short-statured Africans known as the Khoisan that come from Southern Africa. An October 2012 genetic study published in Science magazine found that the Khoisan in Southern Africa are the oldest ethnic group of modern humans, with their ancestral line originating about 100,000 years ago. The Khoisan, formerly called by the derogatory term Bushmen, are genetically unique, and no other currently known population had separated so early from our common modern human ancestor, according to the report. So this is an article from Science magazine. Now here are 2 Khoisan sisters. These are the short-statured Africans. The Khoisan live mainly in Southern Africa, in territories spanning Botswana, Namibia, Angola, Zambia, Zimbabwe, and South Africa. They are largely divided into 2 groups, hunters and gatherers, known as the Sans people, or Sans people, and keepers of livestock, known as the Khoi people. Okay, Sarah J. Bartman, was Khoisan, okay, also known as Hottentot Venus, and you know she was sexually exploited in England in the 19th century. The Khoisan languages include the distinctive click sounds that are not found in the languages of their neighbors. Okay. There's an article from AtlantaBlackStar.com called 5 Ethnic Groups That Prove the First Humans Were Black. And it talks about the Khoisan. Okay, now here is the Dr. David Imhotep on being interviewed on WKRP in Cincinnati, Channel 5. For those that remember the TV show with Venus Flytrap and Lonnie Anderson from the late 1970s, early 1980s, about the radio station WKRP in Cincinnati, there really is a WKRP in Cincinnati. I don't know if there's a radio station, but there is a TV station. Let's go to this clip.
Wow, and we should say, we have a picture of the book too. It's the first Americans were Africans, and we were talking about Dr. Ivan Van Sertima because I remember back in the 1980s, my dad took me to hear him. He came here to Cincinnati, and his book was They Came Before Columbus, and he talked about how Africans were here. He had a lot of, great research information, and so it was just kind of eye-opening. But we haven't heard a lot about that recently. So tell us how you got involved here.
I'm showing that Africans not only came before Columbus, they came before.
Wow, and we should say, we have a picture of the book too. It's the first Americans were Africans, and we were talking about Dr. Ivan Van Sertima because I remember back in the 1980s, my dad took me to hear him. He came here to Cincinnati, and his book was They Came Before Columbus, and he talked about how Africans were here. He had a lot of, great research information, and so it was just kind of eye-opening. But we haven't heard a lot about that recently. So tell us how you got involved here.
I'm showing that Africans not only came before Columbus, they came before the Indians.
So you're going even farther back.
I'm going farther back, at least 56,000 years old.
Okay, now we've got a graphic up here about 130,000 years ago.
Yeah, well, they sailed over here. And when I lecture, people say, well, wait a minute, humans weren't sailing, let alone they weren't boating 130,000 years ago. And I beg to differ. Last year, New York Times quoted in BBC, and they wrote an article on how in Crete they have found a stone industry of stone tools dating back to at least 130,000 years. And Crete has been an island in the middle of the Mediterranean for 5 million years. So they had to sail, and it was a continuous civilization, which means they were going back and forth. They knew how to navigate. So if they got to Crete 130,000 years ago, it's easy 70,000 years later that they could make it to the Americas at 56,000 years ago.
Right. That's really, now how did you even get back to this research? This is just, did you start by reading They Came Before Columbus, and then you expanded on that research?
Yes. You see, 36 years ago, Dr. Van Sertima's book came out, and this information is piled on for 36 years. So many different things, so many cutting-edge articles and things have been found since then.
Yeah, and what's the reaction you get when you talk about how Africans came here even before Native Americans?
People are amazed. They're shocked. They're shocked. First come shocks, and then they're smiling, and some frown, of course.
And then, and what about the school systems? Because, have we gotten this information to the educational system?
Not yet. The book has only been out for a month and a half.
And what kind of feedback are you getting though when you go around and talk about this? I'm assuming you're doing lectures around the country.
Yeah, well, I always bring my peer-reviewed articals.
Okay.
Because my thesis, which is the same as my title, The First Americans Were Africans, is backed up by 7, soon to be 8 peer-reviewed journal articles, which is the height of academia.
Wow. And so you've got credibility. People can see this research. What do you think? Do you think this is going to change history at all?
Well, for hundreds of years in Europe, people thought that the world was flat, and it took a while for them to be able to say the world was round in order to go out there and navigate and see that it was indeed round. So it's going to take a little while for them to get around this, but it will happen.
And so what part of Africa were the Africans from who came to Brazil?
Well, the DNA, the Genome Project found that the earliest ones, the ones that they found in Tierra del Fuego, in the very tip of South America, in 1874, 1876, were the short Africans, the Khoisan, who spoke with clicks like that. The Gods Must Be Crazy did a movie on that.
Yeah, I remember that, yeah.
Yes. So they have
about the Coca-Cola bottle that fell in, yeah.
Yes, they have the oldest DNA and the oldest language on the planet, and they were all over.
Oh, wow.
All over all 3 Americas, as well as Asia.
Well, have they done any DNA tests in Brazil to see that?
Yes, they have. The Genome Project went all around the world. There are 100,000 people participated.
Wow.
Taking DNA swabs.
And so first we know that it's possible to get over here by canoe. And second of all, the DNA from that group of Africans is in Brazil.
The most important thing, not to forget to ask me, well, I will tell you that, where do the Native Americans come from? Well, we've always been taught that they came across the Bering Straits from Asia. This is true, but they did not come until 3000 BC. There is no evidence of them coming before 3000 BC. So for 53,000 years, there were nothing but Africans in North, Central, and South America.
Wow.
When they come over 3000 BC, those two groups, the Africans and the Mongolians, get together, the Asians, get together, and their children are the Native Americans.
Wow.
This is why the Native Americans do not look Chinese. They are a little different than Chinese.
Right. Oh, that's, you know what? I mean, we need to learn. It makes a lot of sense, yes. Dr. Imhotep, and we need to learn our history.
All right. So that's an excerpt of that interview. And I interviewed Dr. David Imhotep, I think about 13 times on the African History Network show. Okay, so as I said in the beginning, there's a concerted effort to suppress the teaching of certain types of history in school. History of slavery, civil rights movement, different aspects of African American history, etc. And this is part of Project 2025 to attack diversity, equity, and inclusion, to dismantle the Department of Education. Chapter 18 deals with dismantling the Department of Education. I've actually been on some panels recently talking about Project 2025. Support the African History Network, $ the AHN show, through Cash App, through PayPal, paypal.me/the AHN show. Here's our QR code for Cash App right here, the bottom of the screen. The information is also on our website, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. You can register for the online classes that I teach. We do the classes live. All the sessions are archived and recorded. So you can go back and watch it anytime. You don't have to join us live in the class. And then you can download you can order my DVD lectures and digital downloads of my presentations as well. So that all will help you and help us as well. Yeah, we know African American History Month is coming up also. Follow us. Now I just shut down I just deactivated my TikTok account because I ain't doing TikTok. I don't know if I'll go back to it. I'm not sure. But I have downloaded Fanbase, so I'm setting up Fanbase also. Everybody download Fanbase, set that up. That's an African American owned and operated social media platform owned by Isaac Hayes III. Okay, so you can support us here. Register for the online classes I teach Saturdays, 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Register right here for it. You can do a debit card, credit card, or PayPal. Download our class lesson plan here. We have our Cash App right here, $ the AHN show. So if you type it into Cash App, type in the full tag, $ the AHN show, SHOW, because there's some fake ones out there and they'll come up before you type in all of it. Okay. Ours, it will say Michael and it may show my picture there. Okay. So we have a QR code here and this shows it also right here, this graphic here. And then paypal.me/the AHN show through PayPal. And I know through PayPal, you can set it up for a recurring contribution if you want to. We definitely appreciate that as well. I can't remember if you can do that, set up for a recurring contribution through Cash App.